Hi, good afternoon. My name is Meenoo Yashar, and I am the Director of Program Quality and Enhancement in the Early Education Department, which is my unit oversees the professional development for the teachers. So that's related to coaching and workshops and assessments. So I think one of the things and I don't know if you talked about PALS, you probably did. So I think when we came together as partners, the district and Stanford, and we were trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to roll out PALS? One of the biggest pieces for us was how are we even going to organize this data? Where do we put it? How do we even do the assessments? For us, it was just a learning process to begin with around, how do we go about gathering information and what kind of information do we need? So even as simple as getting all the demographics of the students and, what kind of information are we going to need to put in what kind of database? Because we had a lot of different pieces of children's information in a lot of different databases. And so starting with something as simple as this phonological awareness literacy screening was like, okay, we know that we want to study this because, again, the implications of third grade reading and what that means for graduation, and we wanted to be part of that trajectory. We wanted to say, here are the things that we're doing in early ed and pre-K that matter and are on that same spectrum of how you get a child to start reading. So we do formative assessments. We do something called the DRDP, the Desired Results Developmental Profile, and teachers are supposed to use this formative observational assessment to inform their teaching practice. But because it's something that's observational, it's subjective, and so it's difficult to get a sense of whether we're using this assessment in a valid sort of way. And so bringing in the PALS was a really great way to kind of cross-reference that. And, with the help of Ben and Laura, really looking at, okay, well, how do we first organize our DRDP? And then from there, how do we then crosswalk PALS information to see where we are in the classrooms? And again, we've never really even utilized assessments in this way before, so we had to educate ourselves, which was one thing, and then we had to educate the teachers around, here's some information, let's talk about what story it tells, and how can you then use it in the classroom. So all that was brand new for us.
Can I interrupt you for a second, Meenoo? Can you then talk about how that evolved? So you got this hold on the data and the understanding of it and the processes, but then how did that help you evolve into the texting study and then your interest in the number sense study?
Right, so, well, with the district, literacy was a huge piece that we were looking at, right, with the Common Core and sort of, just looking at where children were along the trajectory of literacy. And so once we got this piece of information down around where children are at with regards to their literacy, another piece that we wanted to explore was family engagement, which is another huge part of, one of our initiatives is connecting home to school. When we talked about how we could kind of look at this and how can we extend this, I think that's where we started to discuss the idea of, maybe we could try it with the texting, which again was a whole other sort of, okay, how are we going to organize this data? How do we connect with families to get their information? Going out to each of the centers and trying to capture that with the clerk. I mean, there were so many steps because we're such a huge organization. What kind of surveys are we going to use for the families? And how do we collect that information? So I feel like, that to me, that's like another frontier now, because then we can go back and go, well, what responses have the families given us based on that, and how do we correlate that with the PALS in terms of where children are at? And I just also want to say we have dual language classrooms, so we're also utilizing PALS in Spanish and in English, and so it's robust. I mean, now we have a lot of information that we can start to use and start to, I don't know what this thing is, I keep touching it. I
Do you
feel
have
like,
the same hopes for math in terms of
so I mean, the other piece about the math study is, again, it's educating us. Like when Kristen was talking about like cardinality and ordinancy and all these things, these are not terms that we've used in early ed. We do the math, right? It's woven into our curriculum, but we're not speaking to it in the same way that we weren't when it came to PALS and phonological awareness and letter sound recognition and so to be able to talk about it in these terms is educating us, which, even though this study is to see where the students are at, it's language for our teachers. And math is sort of the next big thing, right? So we also have a partnership with West Ed, and they're doing a whole big math study in pre-K, which is why it was so wonderful that Christian was flexible enough to say, well, let's look at it in TK. Because I feel like now we're going to have this information that we can then go back and start to do some professional development on. And that's the other thing that's really nice about all these studies is bringing it back to, okay, what have we learned about where the students are at? How do we educate our teachers to kind of take it to the next level?
So maybe we could pause there, and if Carla, if you have any comments, did you want to add to that, or are you good? I think she's doing a great job too.
The last thing I just wanted to say, which is really lovely, is the capacity building around this, right? So even though it's a study, I don't feel like it's something that's like, oh, okay, we're going to do a study, then we're going to go away, and then we don't have any resources or any way to kind of build that out. And I really feel like both you and then have been able to really help us with that. And we have staff now who understand how to put data together. We have teachers who can read the data, and we're using it in terms of our ROSI cycles. So we do this thing, we're trying to, and many of our teachers are doing this, where it's a results-oriented cycle of inquiry, where you bring in information about what students are learning and then use that to kind of build on next steps. And it's correlated to our DRDP, which is like groups of students who might be at a beginning level, a developing level, and an integrated level around their data, around what they're learning, and then teachers go back and say, okay, this is what I need to do with these students based on the information I'm getting from this data. And that's really helped to inform that process as well. That's great.
So thank you so much, Meenoo. So we tried to save enough time so you all would have some Q&A time. And I think it's actually really nice to have the balance between the researcher and the practitioner here. So to hear both those voices. And also, if you've saved up your questions from the two presentations, now's the time. Anyone, even a comment too? Yes?
I'm just wondering, for your project, the texts are in multiple languages? Is that?
The question was, were the texts in multiple languages?
Chinese. Terrific. And then is there content in there that's also encouraging families to continue to use their home language in building literacy with the young children as opposed to?
We have integrated, some of that.
Yep.
I have a question about that study too, and whether you were at all considering actually providing within the message some sort of picture or thing that parents could use with their children as part of the message. Because
next frontiers. Future directions. We will direct some parents to additional resources in the texts, but everything right now is SMS based. We hope to in the future move to MMS, where we can send pictures and even 2 videos with examples of how to sort of use some of these good parent-child book sharing practices.
yeah, just in terms of thinking about.
Go ahead, Amber.
No, just in terms of thinking about, like, is there a difference between, okay, you give somebody sort of a high-level idea of things to do versus, okay, do this, you know what I mean, activity that they can do right here and now.
Definitely. That's really loud. Sorry. I'll repeat the final part of what she said. It would be interesting to look at the differences, a difference in effectiveness between giving sort of general messages and highly specific messages that are ready to use sort of immediately. And we tried to do the latter. particularly in our tips, because we think that that's an important feature of an effective message, the ability to sort of just take this thing and use it right away.
Yep, Jessica. So I know that you're doing some assessments throughout the study then, but I was sort of wondering, is there any way that you guys can sort of tell how much uptake there is for each particular tip or fact or activity that you're doing? Is there like any way for parents to sort of engage back with these?
We're gathering feedback either at the end of this month or next month, and we hope to get at some of that. We want parents to fill out this. We're worried that if it's too long, they won't. We will get at uptake. I don't know if it will be message specific, but it should give us a good sense of overall uptake. And then, as I mentioned in my presentation, a number of parents respond to our messages, and that's also another nice indication of uptake.
Yep. I have a question about assessment too. And are you doing assessment on the children if their vocabularies are improving or not? Because I think that's important.
Yeah, I'm trying to sort of think on my feet here. So PALS does not get at word knowledge at the pre-K level, but DRDP measures a bunch of early literacy domains, I think one of which is word awareness, but again, this is teachers' evaluations of their children.
That might be good.
Sure. PALS, the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening, I've said that many times in the past few years, gets at a number of skills. Letter knowledge, that task is tiered into 3 components, and if I provide too much detail, cut me off. Lowercase, and then if you succeed on lowercase, move on to uppercase, and then if you succeed on that, into letter sounds. A concept of word, that's PALS 1 through 3. We implemented it pre-K, and then K and 1, and they're different at each level, so it's a little bit jumbled in my head. Apologies. Rhyme awareness, nursery rhyme awareness. Meenoo and Carla, can you help me out? Okay, so that's some. There are 6 in total. I had them down pat at one point. Sorry for a long-winded answer.
Yeah, I have a question for Kristen. I'm very interested. So my first question is whether you look at when you look at the experimental group, whether you only looked at the classroom math versus math as part of the math time and compare that to the control group, because those are the classrooms that did not add math exposure.
I haven't yet. We just finished the assessments like last week, so I haven't broken it down yet. But it would be interesting to look at that definitely. Although it's a little bit promising, though it's not as controlled a study, the ones who use it during, say, choice time, that kids are getting extra math, in their day, which is also sort of a benefit. But it's not as controlled a study against total math time as the other group.
So my other question is, I think that from a parent's perspective, there's always a concern that kids are very focused on tablets and they wouldn't want to interact with other people when they're in front of the tablets. I was wondering what kind of observations are you getting from your students with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as I said, we think of this as one tool among many, so we don't want kids sitting there, staring at the app all day long. And as I said, the teachers really were pretty hands-off when the students were playing it, so it really was one student at the computer playing by themselves, which is fine, but I think it would be really interesting to think in future design about how to make it so that we move past that model and it's either more collaborative or more engaging of the teacher. So I think that's a really good question that we're hoping to think more about.
I was wondering if you had any, I'm not sure if the transitional pre-K has different language programs where kids are having kindergarten in Spanish or another language, and did you have any issues with that?
So she's asking about whether there were different language programs in the TK and if some were in Spanish or English. We did everything in English, in part just as a capacity. That was how we did everything. Definitely on the assessments, we did the assessments in English, and we're sort of under assessing, or you know what I mean. Some students probably have
higher abilities than what we're sort of giving them credit for because we did the assessments all in English. I don't know if there are dual language next year. Yeah.
The transitional kindergarten program is expanding. Do you guys want to talk about that at all? What it's going to? Because it's a big expansion, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll double next year, pretty much. So from 8 to probably close to back to 14 or 15 sites. So we've got the 14 classrooms, and there'll be 28 just because you push out the month back another, so that then you're talking about students who are eligible between, is it September 2nd to December 1st. So yeah, so we'll have kids who are within that 3-month period, because we've been rolling it out slowly year to year. So yeah, and then we'll also have TKs in our elementary school. So that's another place that we're expanding besides our early ed. And so they'll have dual language classes as well.
So we might have time for one or two more questions, but then we can cut it off. Yeah, Brooke.
How long does it take to do the glitter per outcome? Like the entire day?
To get through, so we were hoping students would play about 100 minutes over 5 weeks. So about 10 to 15 minutes per time, a couple of times a week. I don't know how long it would take to go through the whole game, but you can kind of repeat things and problems get harder as you get better. But pretty much 10 to 15 minutes, even 15 minutes, teachers were telling us was a little bit on the high side in terms of keeping the student focus per time that they played. So that was part of why one of the challenges is that, and also one of the challenges of the assessments is that the kids, they can't read yet, they have, shorter attention spans than say a 6th grader. And so you really need to break things into smaller chunks, which is more time consuming. But
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, you want to fight over the final question or what? Oh, okay. You're so polite. Thank you. Go for it. Final question.
Remember how the Common Core has shaped classrooms in pre-K and now in middle school?
Can I give you a microphone on this one? Anyone want to go here?
One more, let's just keep it one more.
Oh, you're doing so well, Meenoo.
Well, I think the answer is how the Common Core has shaped the K-12 system to be more like pre-K. I mean, in pre-K, you are utilizing the environment a lot more, and the focus is on process, how children are doing what they're doing and why versus just getting to the content and the output, which is what the standards were all about, right? Like just getting the answer versus like habits of mind and critically thinking. And so we do a lot of that in early ed. That's our practice. And so I think the Common Core is actually giving kindergarten to, at least kindergarten, because that's a lot of who we were talking about, but kindergarten through 3rd grade, permission to like have more opportunities to look at the process part, right? How are we, critically thinking with our students? What are more project-based curriculums versus information that we're giving them and then testing them on to see if they got the answer. Does that help? Okay.
Name awareness, beginning sound awareness, and print awareness. I was feeling self-conscious. That covers all 6.
You need to get that out.
Thank you.
So I'm going to thank you all for RSVPing, by the way, and I'm going to send an email blast out getting your feedback on this presentation. I'll ask the presenters what I can share of their slides and share them out to you. And if you have more questions for the presenters, feel free to email me or you can track them down directly. And thank you so much for our SFUOC partners for coming so far. Sorry, my directions were not perfect. All right, thank you very much.